All right, can you hear me? Okay, I'm not going to put the glasses on yet, but I've got my timer set. Two reasons. Attention span, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I hope it's a lot more here because I got at least 45 minutes or an hour prepared. Next reason, everybody wants to beat the crowd to the restaurant. I hate to say it. That's just a fact, okay, unless you're going home. But I've got it set for 25 minutes, and I prepared a lot. I mean a lot. 4 commentaries and about 14 different books, plus the Bible. And I had to go to the library for that. And nowadays, when you're not looking for a commentary or some other books, it's all in there, okay? Back in high school, that was in the 60s, I had to do a lot of research and term papers and science papers, science fairs. I did it at the library. They had 3 or 4 different sets of encyclopedias and used the encyclopedias. Nowadays, you don't have to do that. So, got a lot of information, a lot of pieces and parts. The house has been stacked with Post-it notes, note cards. The couch is full. The back of the couch is full. The dinner table's full, or one of the tables, the big one with the touch and the library table. Those were full of books and Post-it notes. So a lot here. I may have to shuffle, okay, to get this all into a time frame. But it's the story of Joseph's faith. Now, to tell you how I've prepared, I've got 2 sets of these. I left one at the house because I said I'm not going to need that. I may not need all of this. I know I'm not going to need all of this. 7 folders, 8 folders, 8 folders. I've got them numbered so I don't lose track of where I am. Doesn't mean that I won't. Here's what I want to do first. Philippians 4, 6 through 7. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need. Thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard our hearts and minds as we live in Christ. Here, I want to say a little prayer, okay? Dear God, we thank you for this day and its many blessings. We thank you for your mercy and your grace. We thank you for all that you've done for us. I have prepared a number of things here. I hope you will give me the ready recollection and remembrance of the things I need to say and help me say it in a smooth manner. In your Son's name, amen. I'll do this at this time, okay? First Peter chapter 1, verses 5, and I'll go through 7. Whereby given unto, and beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, unto virtue knowledge, unto knowledge temperance, unto patience godliness, unto godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity. This whole summer we've had the theme is building blocks of faith, and Joseph is part of it. He went through all the building blocks of the verses that I just read, and then we've added some names: Noah, Abraham, Isaac, skip Jacob. And after reading and studying, maybe I know the reason for skipping Jacob. If I told you that story, if we had the time, you might think the same thing. But then Joseph, Moses came before Joseph because I asked for some extra time. And then we're going to talk about Christ next week. How many of you know Descartes? You know, René Descartes. He's a great mathematician of the 1600s. Founder of calculus, believe it or not. He founder of analytical geometry, one of my favorite courses in high school. And first year or so in college. I can use it for everything. I used to could. I can't use it for anything now. But he was a great philosopher. And as a matter of fact, he introduced the philosophy, the idea of philosophy. And one of the things he said was, I think, therefore I am. That's deep. And that's what I think all the time. So therefore, that's what I am. Joseph did too. There wasn't a lot to do back in those days as we have today. Not much you could do but ride a camel and a donkey and not go very far, because you could travel, if you were really in a hurry, 30 miles a day, maybe 20, 15. How many of you ever traveled 5 miles, 10 miles, 15, 20? I have. As an old scoutmaster up at Troop 54, we did a lot of hiking, a lot of camping, and usually 10 milers, a couple of 15 milers, and one 20 miler. Oh, I never wanted to do that again. Tough. But these people, it was all the time. It was just a matter of fact, everyday thing. Didn't bother them. Excuse me for that. When you're giving a talk, you have to answer the questions: who, what, where, when, why, how. I was taught this back in, I don't know if it's grammar school, junior high, or what. So everything you start telling people, you have to answer those questions. First thing that I want to do is discuss a plan. You know, God has a plan, a master plan for all of us. He knows what it's about. Of course we do too. But He works that plan every day. But here's the thing that I learned when I was at Goodyear all those years. Have a plan. You write it down. You put some names out beside it. Put some dates out beside it. You work the plan. You execute. See, God does this every day. You review your work. Then you make some more progress. You revise your plan. Then you repeat the steps that I just mentioned, and you do this again and again. And you see, God has done that for us. He's got that master plan, and He keeps working it. And if He has to, He revises. And changes in priorities necessitate these changes in plan. And this was one word I hated in corporate, back when I was a part of corporate: evergreen. That means your plan can change. You made these goals up front, then you had this evergreen situation. You could change it. I never could change one. When I make goals, I want to pursue those goals. So anyway, God's plan's evergreen, and us as part of His plan have free will. So therefore, God works on revising His plan. It's all the ultimate purpose, the same thing, and He's going to get it done, but He will revise it. I've got this note: He's a supreme multitasker, and this was what I was looking for when I read the Bible verses. The building blocks of faith. I'll repeat those because you're going to be looking at this at Joseph when I go through his narrative. Faith, virtue, knowledge, temperance, patience, godliness, brotherly kindness, charity, or love. From rebels and sinners to redeemed people. I've done a lot of research on the book of Genesis. I stuck as much as I could to Joseph. But Genesis 12 to 50 shows the steps that God initiated to establish His redeemed people and to make way for Jesus Christ. And He did this through His unconditional covenants with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and His providential care with Joseph. He did not make a covenant with him, but it was His providential care that carried Joseph on. Now, don't let this bother you, but it helps me, okay? Helps me keep track of things. if you start looking at, see, these are post-it notes on a note card. My mind works in a strange way, okay? The faith of Joseph is exemplified, in 3 places. It mentions faith or belief, hope. 3 places, Genesis 48:21, 50, 20, and then in James 1-3. Jacob said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but God shall be with you and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. That's faith exemplified. Genesis 50:20, but as far as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. This was about Joseph. You'll hear this in the story. And then James 1:3, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. And you see this in Joseph throughout the whole story. Hebrews has been called, or I've read, the book of faith. I'll take them at their word. It's the book of faith. It talks about faith a lot. It says in Hebrews 11:1, this is the essence of this study of faith as being a building block. It's part of our Christian growth. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now, we know what these words are. But you know, I took out my old Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 1965 edition, and I looked up all these words because they have various nuances, various meanings used in different contexts. But I'm not going to go over the definitions that I looked at. Well, I will say this: evidence. It's an outward sign that furnishes proof. It's a testimony, something to ascertain the truth of a matter. It's clear, plain, it's unmistakable, it's apparent. All right. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for. What is hope? Faith, hope, belief, trust, subtle nuances. I'm not going to discuss hope. I'm not going to discuss belief. We've had those in other lessons. But hope, that's a word. It depends on the context that you're using for, if it's religious. Now, this is something that Auburn hopes for every year. Now, see, I'm an Auburn man. We hope we're going to beat Alabama. Alabama has the faith they're going to win. They believe they're going to win. Okay. That's an example. There's the nuance. Okay. I like that one. You know, an Auburn joke is not an Auburn joke unless it's an Auburn joke. Just not funny when it's about Alabama. These are analogies. I'll try to draw some parallels. I'm not going to give you any parables, okay? So I don't know any parables. God's master plan. Ordained it's commanded. Providence is divine guidance or care. Now, Joseph was both ordained and he had God's providence. Now, we don't like to talk about ordaining around here, but ordaining by God means from God to people, not from people to people. Okay, there's a difference. I believe, Joseph believed, and we all believe. These were all things I was going to present to you, but in the essence of time, I'm just going to proceed, okay? Providence, divine guidance. And I've got here a number of Bible verses that show that God ordained, it was through God's providence that he took care of Joseph. We'll pass that on, essence of time. Providence, faith, his character, all of the things that described Joseph and any other faithful man. We'll talk about it in just a moment. Now, I believe Joseph would have been guided by the 23rd Psalm. I didn't read this anywhere, but I think had it been written at the time, it's one of the most famous and comforting chapters of the Bible. It's attributed to David, a shepherd himself. Well, you know, there's a lot of shepherds in the Bible. Of course, then when you get to thinking about it, there wasn't any need for, well, there were architects. We know there were architects because Egypt used a lot of architects. They used engineering principles. When you're out in the fields and your life is camels and sheep and goats and donkeys and, well, you don't think much about architecture or engineering. Okay. That's a bad thing about not having a wristwatch. Your smartphone does everything for you. Your Fitbit won't tell you anything but your heart rate and, you know, a few other things. You want to know what my heart rate is? 107. Normally it's upper 50s or lower 60s. I don't understand why, you know. Now, qualities, attributes, characteristics, traits, personality. This is all about Joseph. Now, you read in some of these, he was a smart aleck, he was braggadocious, and but he wasn't. He was just confident. He might have shown a little pride, too much pride, but that was Joseph. Providence by God. His father, Jacob, knew this, saw this in Joseph. That's why he treated Joseph differently. Joseph was the first son of Rachel. Rachel had only two sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Now, Jacob's other wife and handmaidens gave him 10 sons. Sons were important back in that day. Of course, they're all still important. But these were the guys who carried on, did the work, followed the plan. They led the family. Joseph's life was endeared with faith. Perseverance, persistence, determination, endurance, steadfastness, ability to organize, ability to lead, wisdom displayed, persuasion, righteous. And there's, believe it or not, a lot more characteristics. And I listed all of these, but we're not going to go with those. And as I said earlier, the only weakness that it seems he had was his insensitivity to his brothers. Now, I don't know what about your family dynamics, but the ones I grew up in, if you were the smart one, they envied you, they were jealous of you, they teased you, they made your life miserable. And this is what Joseph's 10 brothers did to him. So, and this is part of the story about Joseph. We're all born different, but he was not the bragging, gloating, smart-aleck, rambunctious boy that we know, or that we think he was. He had many gifts, and one of his gifts was interpreting dreams, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. Well, out of all these characteristics that I've listed, there were these: perseverance, determination, and persistence. He displayed this the whole time. Leaders. You know, Blake talked about this here last week, 2 weeks ago. Leadership. I studied a lot of leadership when I was a scoutmaster up at Troop 54 for 12 years and here up at Nakalula. Tim Gentry, that his son Alan sits up here, was his dad, and I served with Tim in Civitans. He was a great Civitans, area, regional, state. He was the winner of the Goodyear Spirit Award. Tim was a great man, good man. But he helped talk me into scouting to take it over temporarily, and I did temporarily for 12 years. How about that? So I went through some leadership training there and learned a lot. One of the building blocks of me, I think, therefore I am. Now, unfortunately, I was going to pass out this last-minute thought to give something you could digest and look at and read and study when you got home. If you're interested, come up to me and I'll give it to you. It's all in Genesis 37 through 50. As a matter of fact, the Joseph narrative goes from 37:1 to 50:26, excluding 38. But you can read that, you know. It's all good for doctrine and reproof. But it's just a good story. The Joseph story is one of the masterpieces of Hebrew narrative art. It's one of the masterpieces of world literature. It shows remarkable human character, survival, prospering by your own wits, controlling destinies, using your natural gifts and superior ability. And it's a story of displaying great faith during a survival mode. Gem clip. I used a lot of gem clips, Scotch tape, and bulldog clips, okay? Just in case you're asked to get up here and give one of these, okay? Genesis 37. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. But, I gave you a preview, a little glimpse of Joseph. But Jacob sent Joseph out to the fields to check on his brothers. Oh, he did not like, the brothers did not like that, okay? So when they saw him coming, here comes the dreamer. They did not like him so much they would not say shalom to him. You know, that's Jewish for, I guess, hello, greetings. They wouldn't even speak to him. And some more reasons. Joseph had a dream. I'm not going to tell you about the dream. You'll have to read it. It's in 37, chapter 37, but it's about binding sheaves. The sheaves bound over, or bowed over to him. And Rebekah told his brothers about that, and you don't think that aggravated them? Of course it aggravated them. They saw right through it. They said, "Are you saying we're going to bow down to you?" As a matter of fact, they asked that question. We going to bow down to you? Well, he had another dream. And this was about the sun and moon and the 11 stars all bowing down to Joseph. Now, this one got his dad aggravated. Jacob didn't like that, so he told him he shouldn't be doing that. But it infuriated his brothers. They saw that as subjection at one point in time. But they didn't know. And I don't know if Joseph knew. It could be said he was a prophet. He could interpret dreams, but you have to ask yourself the question and read, what is a prophet? And in some senses, I see Joseph as a prophet. But he didn't predict what was going to happen. He just saw that it was going to happen. And he presented it. Unfortunately, it made his brothers mad. So the story is that, and I'm not going to read you this story. His brothers get mad at him, and they decide to throw him in a pit. Jacob had sent Joseph out to find his brothers. Well, he had to walk a long way and talk to some people to find his brothers. And when he did, that's when they said, "Here comes a dreamer." Well, they devised a plan to throw him into an empty cistern, pit, well, dry, of course, and kill him and take his robe back to his father. Now, I didn't mention the robe of many colors. That was another thing that really aggravated the brothers, the coat of many colors. The Bible says it's a multicolored coat. But if you look at Jewish history and commentators, they say it was a long coat with long sleeves, a tunic type. But I keep thinking wool, but why would anybody wear wool in the heat of weather riding around on a camel? But anyway, it was a coat that signifies his birthright. And remember, he was the 11th child, a long way from the first child. First child should have gotten the birthright. So two of his brothers decided not to kill him, didn't want to kill him. They thought there's a better way. So they sold him into slavery. And he went to Egypt. And he served under Potiphar. There's a long story there. He was a slave, and he worked at that a number of years. Potiphar had a wife that lusted very much for Joseph and tried many times to get him in bed with her. And he wouldn't do it because of his trust and faith in God. And the fact that he knew that he could not do this to his boss. Okay, I don't know what other word to use here. But sometime in this, between when Joseph was selected as slave and this events with his wife, he was put in charge of all of Potiphar's house. He did everything for Potiphar. Very well respected. This comes to his characteristics, his personality, his very being. But he was put in charge of this. Well, as a result of his wife, he was thrown into prison, the king's prison. It wasn't a white-collar prison. It was more as a white-collar prison there than what white-collar is here. He still was bound in chains, okay, from time to time. Well, he got the attention of the jailer, and jailer put him in charge of the whole jail. There again, goes to his leadership skills. Everything that I have mentioned that I didn't mention, just he was a super man, okay? And while there was two other people that were part of the king's court, a wine cup bearer and a baker, and they each had dreams. The gist of the story is that the wine cup bearer, in 3 days after his dream, he was released, went back in the Pharaoh's favor. The baker was hanged in 3 days. So Joseph asked the wine cup bearer, "Remember me, please, so I can get out of this prison." And unfortunately, like a lot of things, I don't know if his functions as a wine cup bearer, if he felt his prestige, his position, or was the fact that he just forgot about Joseph. But he forgot about Joseph. Then Joseph had these dreams, or the Pharaoh had these dreams, and the wine cup bearer remembered Joseph. So he called him, and he interpreted his dreams. Briefly, 7 years of good crops, abundant crops, and then 7 years of famine. And so Joseph offered him a plan. Here's what we do. And Pharaoh was so impressed that in his knowledge of what Joseph had done for Potiphar and in jail, he made him second in command. Can you believe that? From slave to second in command over Egypt, right behind Pharaoh. And let me catch up here. The next parts of the story, Joseph had his plan, and it was a good plan, smart plan. And it got them all the stores and warehouses full of grain that they had, corn and what other grain that Egypt had. And people from all over, up in Canaan and all over Eastern Asia, Western Asia, came for food because the famine was that bad. So there's some good parts. This is a very good story, the whole thing. You're going to have to read it. That's your lesson. You've got to read 37, skip 38, 39 through 50. Okay? I've got to wind this up. But anyway, this is about the first trip and second trip of his brothers and his dad down to Egypt to get food. Jacob didn't make the first trip, just the second trip, or third trip. It was the third trip. First two was about the brothers. Great stories here. Joseph being as cunning and wise and deceitful. You wouldn't think deceit would play a part of this, but deceit was. And he was capable of trickery. He made his brothers sweat bullets, as I say. He played the situation well. You remember I said one of the dreams, they bowed to him? Well, going through this thing, you have to study. It's not just a matter of reading and glossing over. It's really studying. And I really studied. The brothers bowed to him 3 times. How about that? Did he know they were going to bow to him? I don't know. Providence. Their father came down, Jacob came down. He moved his whole household. And they were able to survive the famine. A lot more detail in there. And what did I say a moment ago? Read the scriptures. Read the story. It's one of the great masterpieces in world literature. Okay? And even though I've got more to present, and just think, I had a black valise that I had important facts. Facts. I like facts. I'm a fact man. Matter of fact, I usually had to give the facts to everybody. But that's when you say question man, answer man. I used to be an answer man. Well, I'm a question man now. I just question everything. So why? I think, therefore I am. Joseph was faithful to God. And what about the persistent faith of Joseph? As I said, in 3 places in the Bible it mentions the faith of Joseph. But it's not as if he exhibits faith. You've got to look for it. You've got to study it and find it. And I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell here. A persistent faith is not shaken by fierce adversity. Boy, Joseph went through a lot of fierce adversity, didn't he? Read the story. I've alluded to some of it, told you. Persistent faith is not spoiled by success or prosperity. Joseph, this guy went from being thrown in a well to head over Potiphar's court. And Potiphar was, he was the chief, I don't want to say jailer. That looks not an important job, but it was an important job for Pharaoh. And head of all his business, head of all of Pharaoh's business. Persistent faith is not moved by the most subtle temptation. Now, I don't think that the temptation of Potiphar's wife was quite subtle. It was just in your face, in your face. So, and I told you he wouldn't fall to her demands. A persistent faith is not perturbed by broken pledges. The chief butler, wine bearer, forgot him. Joseph trusted in God to see him through. Persistent faith is not influenced by human reasonings. How do I explain this? There's 2 Bible verses here that I'm not going to read. But we like to reason out of faith at times, reason about faith. So this is just thinking. Persistent faith is not defined by time horizons. Well, look at Joseph from age 17 to 30 when he started preparing for the famine. 13 years, he showed his faith. So there's no timelines there. Right. Here's another point that, let me just put this here. We're not supposed to make comparisons, but I told you at the outset, analogies, parallels. We don't do parables today. We like to do analogies and parallels. And these are similarities that are seen between Joseph and Jesus Christ. Let me read these. He was a shepherd of his father's sheep. His father loved him dearly. He was hated by his brothers. He was sent by his father to his brothers. Others plotted to harm him. He was taken to Egypt, sold for the price of a slave, tempted, falsely accused, bound in chains, placed with 2 other prisoners, one who was saved and one who was lost. He was exalted after suffering. Both had 30 years of age at the beginning of their public recognition. Both wept. And I didn't even get into the weeping part of Joseph. Blake had a sermon on this the other day. It wasn't a sermon on this, but it was part of it. Weeping is an outward manifestation of your faith. And Joseph wept a number of times upon seeing his brothers, his youngest brother, and his dad. So both saved their nation. And what men did to hurt them, God turned to good. All right. Running a little over, but that's okay. This is church, okay? And there's no one, there is a clock. You know, I did not know there was a clock in the back. How about that? I do know that in church many years ago, we had some smart alecks in our church, but they didn't turn out like Joseph. I do remember sitting in the back of the church with all the other teenagers. We're at a large church in Talladega. Somebody doing this, you know. Oh, that was embarrassing. In your life, this is in summation. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is a gift of God. What's your faith? What's your plan? Is it time now for you to revise your plan? That concludes this. I hope that was informative. I had to include a whole lot. Like I said, I cleared out the back of the couch, the dining room table, and well, no, the dining room table still got books all over it, but then the hutch and the library table. And I left the other folder at home, okay? So thank you so very much. Now, one thing else. I always like to volunteer. You know, Blake talked about volunteering today. Who would volunteer to lead us in a short closing prayer? Yes, sir.
Join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and thank you for all our many blessings. We pray that you go to the sick and those that have lost loved ones. We thank you for the lesson we've had today and pray that we'll apply this to our lives. Forgive us when we fall short. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Good job. You did a lot of preparation on
Thank
that.
you. Yeah. Takes a lot of preparation. I appreciate all you guys. If it weren't for you guys, I wouldn't have gotten up here probably. But wait a minute. Cut this off.